All right, just gotta wait a couple seconds. Good afternoon, and thank you all for tuning in to the not exactly the Rotoworld basketball show, but our weekly Q&A starting up. I'm Raphielle Johnson. This week we got Dan Titus, Yahoo Sports, joining us. Dan, have you recovered from last night's mock draft?
Yeah, I have, man. And I actually did another mock this recently. And I think this is like really the season where this is like the prime Q&A mode, because I got my draft starting up as soon as Friday, and it's going to go all through Monday. And it's going to be an aggressive schedule. I think this is the most leagues I've had since the pandemic, which is kind of crazy. It's hitting double. It's definitely hitting double digits, and all paid leagues. So like, it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a good, entertaining year for fantasy basketball.
We're back outside in double-digit leagues, man. That's wow. But
yeah,
we love it. Great time. For those of you who are on the first link, we had some technical difficulties. Thank you for sticking with us. We still have some questions saved from that, so if you're not back in here, we can always go back to those later. Without further ado, let's hit the first question. Ben Spicer asks, higher risk, higher reward Wemby or safe floor and reliable output Nikola Jokic at number 1 overall? What do you think, Dan?
It's a win-win situation, but I think if you're playing fantasy basketball for the fun of the game, for the love of the game, like, you got to pick Wemby number 1. And I think that there's statistical advantages to having Wemby number 1. Obviously, you're going to get a huge variance in blocks. But if you're looking in totality, like, Nikola Jokic is a top 3 player. So I understand the high floor with Jokic, but if I'm looking at box scores and wanting to have like the most ridiculous, crazy opportunity for upside and ceiling, I think you have to go Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, I certainly get the argument for both players. I just think I'm kind of like you here. If I want to take a swing, because you grab Wemby and he has the year that we think he can have and he stays healthy. That's going to be a lot to make up for whoever you're up against, especially in category leagues. He's someone who could win block shots by himself in a given week. And I don't know if there are too many people you can say that about a single category. Steals, those are kind of spread out a bunch, say about 20, 25 guys probably get you 1.5 steals per game. Talking about 3.6 blocks here, and Wemby is a rookie. Unless people just stop shooting layups and dunks in Spurs games, that if that's his floor in terms of block shots, man, it's going to be incredible. So
absolutely incredible. And I think that the one thing that I think is slept on about Jokic is, we talk about his efficiency and his stat stuffing, but he actually did average over a steal per game. So, the steals aspect of it, like, Jokic actually isn't that far away. It's just how much of a statistical advantage you have in blocks by having Wemby on your team just takes your team to another level. And I feel like he's one of those players, him and Jokic, you can build around. They're 5-tool players. So outside of field goal percentages and maybe turnovers is the only weaknesses for Wemby. Everything else is just going to be so high volume that you can't pass on him for number 1.
That's a good point. Moving on, next question, boys. This is Karan. Shout out to Karan.
What's up, Karan?
Fantasy. What's your confidence level in Noah Clowney working out as a flyer this year?
Confidence level, I mean, it's pretty high. I just don't know how long it's going to take to get there, because I mean, I think it's setting up pretty well. Day'Ron Sharpe is hurt. Trendon Watford is hurt with hamstring injury, so he already could slot in there as a power forward / backup center for Nick Claxton. And when you're looking at this rebuild unit, I mean, how long will it take for Dorian Finney-Smith to potentially get traded? I think there's just way more upside on a rebuilding team for someone like Noah Clowney to be worth it as a late round flyer. And he has like a GG Jackson profile where he can shoot the 3, can extend the floor, very good defensively for his age. He's super young, so I think that if you're invested in a rebuild, this is a good player to kind of invest in as a late round flyer.
Yeah, like, you're not really putting up too much with a late round flyer as it is. Like, if they don't pan out within the first month or so, you can easily drop them. But as Dan noted, that roster is such that they're going to have to play him early and often. Dorian Finney-Smith, don't forget Cameron Johnson as well as another potential in-season trade candidate. So I think Clowney, I'd feel relatively confident in using a late-round pick on him and just seeing where that takes you, because, like I said, that team to be really bad, they're going to have to play their young guys. Him. I don't expect anything from Derek Whitehead just because of the amount of time he missed due to injury. But, after the trade deadline, maybe he comes into the fold as well. All right. Cow Chad TTV. Good to have you boys back on for another year for real this time. I agree. I'm usually good with technology, but we had some issues earlier, so we're on a new link, obviously. Yeah, it's good to be back and looking forward to talking fantasy basketball throughout the season, whether it's here in the Q&A or our weekly Rotoworld basketball show. Those of you looking for fantasy draft content, tonight we will have our 12-team 9-cat head-to-head mock draft we did last night. We recorded last night. That will drop on the pod tonight. Get to listen to that. We had some really good fantasy basketball minds participating as well. So if you need a little more last-minute advice, I checked that out because that draft got a little wild and unpredictable early.
Yeah, and I think it's a great testament to like you gotta be ready to be flexible and pivot in fantasy drafts. Mm-hmm. Like not all drafts are created equal. So I think there was a lot of value going off the board, but then at the same time, a lot of reaches and surprises that kind of shook up draft strategy. Yeah. So really fun exercise in case you guys get in some crazy leagues.
Next question, Rizzy McGuire. Is Ryan Dunn a standard league ad? And what's your outlook on Nikola Jovic in Miami since he's starting?
So I don't think Ryan Dunn is quite there for 12-team leagues. If you're playing in 14, maybe deeper than that, maybe you want to give him some consideration. But I still also want to understand if this is a real thing, his three-point shooting. We know the defensive attributes and how well he played for UVA, lockdown defender. I thought he was more of like a Matisse Thybulle, but I was talking to fortunate to be on the Kevin O'Connor show the other day, and he was talking about how he was touting him as a Herb Jones light. And I was like, wow, if you're getting a Herb Jones as a bench player for the Phoenix Suns, that's pretty scary. So I don't think he's going to have their opportunity yet just because the starting lineup is pretty well established. But in the second unit, maybe he can be disruptive enough to get a couple stocks that might be worthwhile in a deeper league. In terms of Nikola Jovic, I think he's worthy of a late round flyer if he's starting. I just don't know how fluid that rotation is going to be. Yeah. How much minutes he's going to be secured. I think 20 is definitely a safe bet, 20, 25 minutes if he's starting. And he was a pretty effective fantasy player when he got those minutes. So if his minutes creep up to the high 20s, 30s, then I'm definitely interested. But I kind of want to put it in a wait and see category right now.
Yeah, hitting on Jovic first, I think his minutes will be more secure than they were last year. Even though he was a starter, we'd see him play like 10, 15 minutes a night at times. So yeah, I think it'd be a little bit more secure. But the question is, what's his minute ceiling? You got Jaime Jaquez Jr. Haywood Highsmith, I think, is going to take on a bit larger of a role within that rotation as well. And then also the trump card, are there times where Kelly Ware earns his minutes and plays alongside Bam Adebayo? Bam has shown better three-point shooting during the preseason. We'll see if that holds in the regular season. But I think Jovic, late-round flyer at best, I would say, because I think you're going to be looking at 20 to 24 minutes per game. I don't see much room for much else beyond that just because of the options that Eric Spoelstra has to work with. As for Dunn, he's a deep league guy. He's looked far more confident shooting the basketball than he did at Virginia. So that's a positive sign. The defense we knew was going to be there. But like Dan said, I want to see this. I want to see if it's real once the games actually count and you're not going up against he has been starting, so that you give him that in terms of who he's playing against. But the rotation is going to be considerably tighter once the regular season starts.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Ben now has another question. Who are the teams to watch out for the most with shutdown risk and player rest this season?
The most. You definitely put Brooklyn in that category. Washington Wizards. I'm really curious to see how their development track goes when they acquired Jonas Valanciunas. Obviously, still have Kyle Kuzma there, but they have quite a few studs waiting in the wings, and Alex Sarr and Bob Carrington. Like, there's just so much youth on that team. that I could see them moving to that youth movement quicker, sooner rather than later. I think Portland probably stands out the most. I think the dark horse for is probably Utah.
Yeah.
We'll see how they get how good of a start they get out to. But if Lauri Markkanen, if they're not playing very well, like I could see them trading John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, if he has any trade value, and then it could be the youth movement going on in Utah. So I think those are the teams that probably stand out the most in terms of tank potential and when it could actually happen.
Yeah, I think with Utah, you're kind of hoping something happens early. Like each of the last 2 seasons, they've been kind of hanging around that playing spot, and then at the trade deadline, Danny Ainge pulls the plug. That would be like the worst possible scenario for a fantasy manager, because then if you're counting on Lauri Markkanen, you've likely spent either a second or third round pick on him. You're probably going to do that either way, but at least you would have a better idea of what you're going to get if that plug gets pulled in, say, late December or January as opposed to early February. So, those teams I think Dan mentioned, those are certainly on par in terms of – those are certainly ones that I agree with. In terms of player rest, I think you have to look at Philadelphia, given Joel Embiid, Paul George, their recent knee situations, and also chatter about, not really looking to play in every back-to-back. So those are teams that's one team to keep an eye on. Boston, Al Horford. It's going to be starting with Porzingis down. He didn't play in both ends of a back-to-back at all last season. He didn't get any younger, so that's probably going to be the case this year too. So those are a couple player rest situations I'd keep an eye on.
Yeah, I totally agree with Boston. I mean, 3 of their players were on Team USA in the offseason. So, after a deep playoff run and then going right into the Olympics and then into the training camp, like I wouldn't be surprised if they have some periodic rest for some of their stars as well.
Good dynasty question.
Ooh.
One dynasty question just to keep you guys on your toes. Well, it's question light. Not so much anymore, but it's all good. Can I get by on a win now squad with just Mobley, Olynyk, and Collins, a center eligible 10 category?
In a dynasty, I don't see why not. I mean, you got the youth in Evan Mobley to kind of hold you down for the future, and then Kelly Olynyk will be a rotational player. I think Jakob Poeltl was pretty honest about his plans and what Toronto's really looking like. They're not planning to win the championship right now, so I think he's going to be a fixture of the rotation as they trying to just figure out what their new identity is. And John Collins, he'll be worthwhile until he gets traded somewhere else that we don't know about yet.
All right. Now, bringing up the second part of his question, should I look to move Tyus Jones, who's buried on my depth chart, for a veteran center? I think I would kick the tires on that personally, since you said, it's a win now team. Collins concerns me just because in the preseason, he and Walker Kessler have not been on the floor together at all, and Kessler's playing high 20s in minutes. So I think that lowers Collins' ceiling. I thought he was someone with an outside chance of top 100 value if there was a split or if he was going to get a true chance to compete to start. Doesn't appear that way. You basically have 2 backups between he and Olynyk. If you're looking to win now, I think if you can afford to move on from Tyus Jones, I would probably look into that to get like a more reliable center in terms of minutes.
I just wonder what reliable center you're going to be able to get for Tyus Jones. Like, I mean, Tyus Jones is a late round pick, so you might have to attach a future second round pick or so forth to kind of make that move happen.
Mm-hmm. Brian asked, for my 10-team 9-cat head-to-head, I have the 4th overall pick. What do you guys think of my first 3 picks? SGA, Chet, and Maxey. Ooh, I like Maxey, 3rd round.
I think probably in a 10-team, Chet is a little bit early for second round, but I think it's fine. I mean, because the way you follow that up with Maxey, you get 2 score first guards that have steals potential, stocks potential, and then you also have Chet, who's an efficient big who can get 8 rebounds and potentially lead the league among the league leaders in blocks. So I think it's a nice core start for the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, I think 10-team Maxey would work out to be like 24th overall, if I'm not mistaken. So
that's good.
I think that's about where he would go in 12-cat, when you think about the recent news. So I think getting him at that point is good value. Chet may be a bit early, but I'm not complaining. So I think that's a really good start for your team in a 10-team 9-cat. So yeah, good work. Hopefully the rest of the draft panned out for you as well. Let's see. Raymond Lim asks Trae Young or James Harden at pick 10, 14 team head-to-head 9 cat. I think I'd go Trae. I'm
going Trae too. I was thinking about it for a minute because I'm like, I could see Harden being absolutely phenomenal for the start of the season, but I just have so many questions around what else in Los Angeles. And
yeah,
I don't know. I just feel like he could come up limp on a hamstring injury real quick, and then we're like, why did we draft James Harden in the first round or early second round? Whereas I feel like Trae Young, I think he's going to play a lot of games. I think Atlanta's going to be better than people think, and he's a lot to prove, man. I think he's been disrespected on a lot of lists. That ESPN list came out again, and he was nowhere to be found in the top. The top tier of echelon of guards in the league. So I don't know. I think Trae's going to be in for a big year, usage wise. 25 and 10 coming up.
Yeah, you may take a hit in the turnover category, but it's not like Harden's going to be that much superior than him in that. So yeah, I would go Trae Young just because they're both going to have heavy workloads to shoulder. But I think in terms of Trae, he's got Jalen Johnson, he's got Bogdanovich. Those two guys I think will help him offensively. The Clippers, you got Ivica Zubac, like Norman Powell, I guess as a starter, but it's like, that
Kawhi for like 50 games if we're lucky.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I think
supporting cast is way weaker.
Yeah, I would go with Trae Young in that spot. Air Dunks asks, who's my next drop for a hot free agent? Horford, KCP, Josh Hart, Amen Thompson, 12-team 8-cat roto, and he gives us some options for pickups: Bilal Coulibaly, Dyson Daniels, or Shaedon Sharpe. Now, I would scratch Shaedon Sharpe off that list immediately because he is injured, and I don't think he's going to be able to help you anytime soon. So, So we're left with Bilal and Dyson Daniels. I would not drop Al Horford that much.
I would drop KCP.
Yeah,
I would, because at this point, he's a decent 3-and-D guy, but I think, he's going to probably average 11 points with 2 threes a game and a steal and a half. That's solid. That's cool. But I think I would probably take Dyson Daniels. I'd take a roll of the dice there because I think he could actually end up being, if he starts, awesome. Worst case, maybe he's 6th, 7th man, but I think he's going to actually have more influence in fantasy just because of his stocks and his potential for rebounds at the position and assists. So I actually think he's going to get a pretty significant role on Atlanta, a team that's searching for somebody that can actually hold down that second unit from a playmaking standpoint.
Yeah, I'm still kind of stuck on dropping KCP.
You drop Horford over? I mean, well, at least
No. I would. Okay. I'm thinking Josh Hart. Looking at those options.
Even if Josh Hart starts,
I just kind of worry about what he will be doing offensively. As you look at that lineup, where you've got Brunson, Cat, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby. All those guys are going to need to eat. And I try not to put too much into one game, but Josh Hart didn't attempt a shot in their exhibition on Sunday. I don't expect that to happen during the regular season, but I think of the 4 players listed, he's the one I would potentially consider dropping for Dyson Daniels. But yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's going to be tough without seeing the rest of the team and what you're deficient in. But if you're looking for stocks, I think you hold KCP and threes because I think he'll probably offer more of that than Josh Hart. But Josh Hart has the rebounds and the kind of stat stuffing potential if there's an injury.
Okay, how would you rank these players? Josh Hart, Aaron Nesmith, Dyson Daniels, Kevin Porter Jr., Tari Eason, and Noah Clowney. Now, we don't know what your league settings are, so can't really
the points league, the category.
They can't really specify, in terms of the rankings. But I think just going off of raw rankings, I really like Tari Eason. I know he didn't play too much last year because of injury, and they have a bit of a loaded rotation on the wings in terms of young players who can give you really good value. But we've seen him produce top 100 value. So I think he's someone that would be high on my list. Even with what I said about Josh Hart just a few minutes ago, I think he would be one of the better options of these guys. Probably have him behind Dyson Daniels, though. Clowney, it's another. We talked about him earlier. Aaron Nesmith, interesting. I think he fits well with that starting lineup in Indiana, but similar question to Josh Hart. How much room is he going to have to contribute offensively, given that rotation? So then rounding out, Kevin Porter Jr., ultimate throw of the dice. And plus, we don't know if he's going to be suspended to start the season. So he would be last of those players you list here.
Yeah, I would go with Nesmith first because I know that he's getting starters minutes. He's shown, at least last season that he can be an efficient 3-point shooter, also a good defender too. So I think he's a pretty safe late round pick. And then I'd probably go Dyson Daniels, Noah Clowney, Josh Hart, Eason, just because I don't know how much he's actually going to play. I think eventually there's going to be a push the chips in moment for the Houston Rockets. And I don't know if he's going to be the, one of the pieces that they're including or whether he'll be the beneficiary. But I think either way, I think that there is some upside. Eason's just one of those guys that fills the stat sheet in limited minutes. And then lastly, KPJ, just because we don't know, as you said, is that suspension may be looming. Maybe it doesn't happen and he'll get an opportunity to play. But he's probably one of those guys I'm just not drafting just because he's the off the court stuff.
Yeah. All right. You get to talk about one of my guys here.
Hey.
What do you make of Stephon Castle in 2024-25 with rising ADP? Obvious short term is through the roof with Vassell out, but once he's back, is Castle going to be enough ahead of Tre Jones' hit ADP value?
I mean, I'm with it. The only thing, he doesn't. You got to know what you're getting into, right? Like he's not going to be a prolific 3-point shooter. The jump shot definitely needs work, but that doesn't mean that he can't still get downhill and create and get rebounds and get steals. And so I think he's actually going to come along a little bit on the slower end, but I think as we start to see the season progress a little bit more, he'll get more opportunities to showcase what he can do. And I think it's just great. The landing spot, obviously learning behind Chris Paul to facilitate an offense is only going to bode well for the future. I would be okay with taking him as a late round flyer if you're looking for a guard that can, contribute to rebounds, assists, and stocks, but just don't rely on him as an effective scorer.
Yeah, in addition to all that, I can see a lineup where you have Paul and Castle on the floor at the same time. I don't know if I can say that about Paul and Tre Jones.
Right.
And when you talk about a backup, I think that's a big issue in terms of Tre Jones's value. So yeah, I think Castle's going to be fine in terms of ADP. Like he should only be a late round guy at this point. So if you're seeing him any higher than that, that would be a bit of a reach. But I don't think too many managers are reaching to an extreme with Castle right now.
No, his ADP is he's going in like the 12th, 13th round. So this is a late round pick for sure.
All right. Brian asks, you can only pick one, Cam Thomas or Jordan Poole.
Cam, baby, Cam. It's got to be Cam. No, but I see it. So the reason I say Cam is because I feel like Cam is going to be, top 15 scorer this year. And I think he'll increase his assists to at least 4 per game. Still probably going to have some efficiency, ups and downs and maybe some turnovers issues. But I think he's in a better situation as the focal point of the offense than Jordan Poole, who's, still having to feed Kyle Kuzma, who's airballing, and Jonas Valanciunas. We don't know what he's going to give and how many minutes he's going to play. I just think that Cam Thomas, I feel like the Brooklyn Nets situation just looks a little bit more secure to me. And Jordan Poole, as a point guard, I think is definitely better value, but I don't know. I think he's going to be all over the place with this rebuilding team. Yeah.
I'm going to take Jordan Poole just because I feel like you can get a little more value in some of the other categories. Like Thomas, the points category, if we were just to focus on that, I would take him. But Jordan Poole being the starting point guard, whether or not it works, we'll see. But I think that gives him a better chance of giving you slightly higher overall fantasy value. To answer Tony's question, it comes up a little later. He asked if Jordan Poole will bounce back this year. I don't think it can get any worse. So I'll go ahead and say I'll lean yes on that.
Yeah, I think it's more about where he was drafted relative to ADP last year. Like he was going in the 5th round, and whereas now he's going, way deeper than that. I think what is his ADP now? It's probably in the 70s, 80s. Yeah, 87 right now. And so I think that's probably closer to his floor, which is, I'd say probably, it's definitely closer to his floor. And that's a pretty affordable price for a starting point guard that late that you can potentially get like 5-6 assists a game.
Let's see. Thoughts on young guns like Ryan Dunn? We discussed him earlier. Montas Buzelis and Taylor Hendricks, are they draft worthy? I think Hendricks is. I think of these three, he's the one that I would probably rank at the head of this list in terms of a late round flyer, if not a little earlier for him, because he's going to be a starter in Utah. So I think he, at least early on, we'll see what happens with Cody Williams. But I think Taylor Hendricks is, of these three, would be the one I would probably draft right now.
I draft Taylor Hendricks as well. It's just the starting role and what he can do in terms of 3-pointers, rebounds, blocks. That late in the draft, I think that's pretty valuable. Montas Buzelis could be a person that emerges later on, depending on what goes on with Zach LaVine and Patrick Williams, whether he can actually play to his contract. I don't know why the Bulls gave him that money, but that's a discussion for another time. Ryan Dunn's not going to be fantasy viable in 12-team leagues unless there's an injury.
Tony has another question. Naz Reid or Mark Williams this year?
That's a tough question because I think the short answer should be Mark Williams, but because he has a foot sprain right now and all commentary around it seems to be positive, but we fell into that trap before. So I think you just have to be extra cautious. And with Naz Reid, I think you know what you're going to get. I think his role is going to be expanded this year now that Karl-Anthony Towns is gone. He was 6th man of the year for a reason, and this dude is only getting better. So part of me says go with the safer bet, which is Naz Reid. But if you're playing with fire and you like to roll the dice and you want the upside, then go Mark Williams, because I think when he's on the court, it's going to be pretty special. But the problem is we just don't know what it's going to look like injury wise.
I'm going to play it safe here and go Naz Reid. In addition to the reasons that Dan mentioned, we still don't know when Julius Randle is going to be back. So obviously we've seen Minnesota in the past play the two big lineup. Obviously Cat and Rudy Gobert would be a different dynamic than Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert, but Naz is going to get quality minutes in that lineup. He's stayed relatively healthy. He's had some injuries, obviously, but we haven't had any significant questions regarding his availability. So I think I would go Naz Reid as opposed to Mark Williams, based upon where you're probably going to be getting these guys in drafts.
Yeah.
Mikey asks, where do you see Embiid going in 9-cat? First, second round turn seems right. I feel like that's where he should go, but I think he's going to go earlier than that,
Yeah, so we just did where did Embiid go in our mock? Let's give the viewers a little precursor here. Where did he go? Like 10, I think, to Noah?
I believe so. Yeah, Noah. Yep, Noah did ultimately draft him there.
I don't think he's going to get past 10, and it's only because of it's Joel Embiid here. Like when he plays, he's a top 3, top 5 option, right? So I think it is justified for him to go first, second round turn, just based off of what we know and how many games he's projected to miss. If he's not playing 15 of their back-to-backs, that's already down to 67 games, and then you factor in whatever that period of time off that they described, whatever that's going to factor into, plus the periodic evaluations. It just sounds like Embiid is shaping up to play like 50, 60 games and just be healthy for the regular season. So in those 50 games, he's going to be very valuable, but just got to factor in there's going to be some other nicks along and bumps along the road.
All right. Evelyn asks, better power forward to have on the Bulls, Patrick Williams or Montas Buzelis?
I like the busy. Is that his nickname now? We're getting busy. Montas getting busy.
Yeah, according to Evelyn, it is. So we'll go with that. But I think it's weird. Like I try not to hold things against players in terms of like fantasy pass, but there's no way I'm going to commit to Patrick Williams at this point. Good for him. He got his payday this summer, but I'm still wondering who the Bulls were bidding against with that contract. But, yeah, I think I would go Buzelis because I think there's going to be a point later in the season where they're going to have to play those young guys because that's not like what does that fan base get from the front office competing to be 9th or 10th in the East every year? So I would go Buzelis basically because I'm tired of the Patrick Williams fantasy roller coaster.
Yeah, I just don't know what Patrick Williams offers besides, low end points.
Yeah.
Okay peripherals, like he's a decent 3-point shooter, but I think that eventually Buzelis is going to crack the starting lineup and he's going to be the team. This is going to be the team that's rebuilding, looking to the future. So, Williams will still have his time on the floor, but he's just proven to be, he's like one of those players that gets a ton of minutes, but just is just running cardio and doesn't do much to impact the game. So I'm off him in fantasy.
Mm-hmm. J Mac asks, 12 team head-to-head 9-cat. Thoughts on where you draft Jimmy Butler for good value? He slipped to the 59th pick in my draft.
That's good value.
That's
congratulations, congratulations, you won.
That's excellent value for him.
That's crazy.
We've seen him produce elite per game value. The issue is how many games you can get out of him. And I kind of feel like this summer in Miami motivated him a bit. They weren't going to part with that money like he may have hoped they would just because of the availability question. So I think he's going to be locked in. As long as he avoids a serious injury, I think he's going to get you 65 games as he should. So 59th pick, that's excellent value for Jimmy Butler.
I mean, you're getting him almost a round later than he's going relative to ADP. That's extreme value no matter how you look at it.
We discussed Mark Williams earlier, but yes or no question. Does Mark Williams break out this year?
If he can stay healthy, yeah. Big if, but I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, that's why I say no. Sorry. Calchad TTV asks, how do you see the Blazers front court shaking out if Klingon performs well? Does Time Lord healthy scratch? Does Ayton become a prominent trade candidate?
I haven't drafted Robert Williams anywhere in 12-team formats, and I don't know that I've gone to the Donovan Klingon side of things yet either. I think eventually it's going to be Donovan Klingon that wins out.
Yeah.
Whether Ayton can boost his trade value enough along with Jeremy Grant, I think that's to be seen. But right now, I actually think that DeAndre Ayton is one of those players that's his name and his off the court antics, and I don't know, he's just a comedy show. But I think it's actually hurting his fantasy value or his ADP a little bit, and I think you can actually scoop him up as a pretty decent, big man. I just don't know what's going to happen at the end of the season, and that's the biggest concern when you draft anybody on Portland. That's not Denny Avdija or probably Scoot Henderson. Is like what's going to happen when they actually mail it in. In that place, that's where Donovan Klingon's going to have like a pretty sizable role. But I don't think we can really tell what the true value of DeAndre Ayton is on the outside market.
Yeah, I think if Klingon performs well, both of those other guys become trade candidates. But the question is, can they really be moved? Like Ayton has that astronomical contract. Williams can't stay healthy. So I think that's going to be a factor to consider as well. But Portland invested a lottery pick in Donovan Klingon. I think he's going to get every opportunity to ultimately show he's their center of the future. Let's see. Who are your most drafted players so far, and who are the players you already have fear of missing out for not drafting?
I've drafted a lot of James Harden, LaMelo Ball, Evan Mobley, Tyrese Maxey, Jalen Duren, Cam Thomas, Jalen Suggs, Zach Edey, Walker Kessler. So I think in general, I think the FOMO for me is, am I leaning too far into the breakout guys and I'm missing out on the guys that have proven to be good fantasy assets. So, the unheralded guys, like, I shouldn't say unheralded, but like the guys that just people just don't really have interest in drafting, like Tobias Harris, I think could be really good in fantasy this year. DeJounte Murray is a person that I think could go higher in drafts if people recognized, his capabilities and what he could do. Yeah, I think there's always going to be some players that you miss out on just via your draft strategy and how the board falls to you. But I think ultimately, like, I have so many leagues that I'm going to find a piece of everybody in some sort of way. But yeah, I think you can go to my fantasy blueprint for Yahoo, and you can check out my guys that I'm really high on.
Yeah, the guy I missed out on the most in my draft so far is Tyrese Maxey, especially in the aftermath of the Embiid and Paul George situations. So that's one guy I feel like he's going to be the reason why I don't win a league, because I didn't get him. But yeah, I think Tobias Harris is someone I've been able to pick up middle rounds. So I've been pleased with that. I think he's going to do well in Detroit. They're tired of losing, so it's a different rebuilding situation up there. So I think his value will be safe throughout the season. Let's see. Tim asked, or is it TIM? I'm not sure. Maybe like TI or something like that. But any tips for teams with high pace or change of pace due to change of the head coach? I think one example of this could be Detroit. JB Bickerstaff, Cleveland was 22nd in pace last year. Detroit 9th. That's an interesting question. I think the Pistons may be well served to slow things down a little bit. When you look at how they played last year, overall offensive rating, they were 27th out of 30 teams. So it might be good for them from an efficiency standpoint to play a little bit slower. Maybe that benefits a Cade Cunningham in the turnover category. If anything, we've seen Jaden Ivey play really well during the preseason too.
Yeah, I think the team that stands out most for me is the Phoenix Suns, moving from Frank Vogel to Mike Budenholzer. I think there's going to be a clear increase in threes attempted, and so I think they'll also be able to push the pace a bit more. I think Phoenix was like middle of the pack in terms of pace last year, like 15. Mm-hmm. So I think they'll probably be closer to that top 10 with Coach Bud there.
Yeah, that's a good call. Didn't know Malcolm Brogdon was injured. Hold or drop, 12-team head-to-head 9-cat. Obviously, this depends who's on the waiver wire, but I feel like his window for fantasy relevance may be pretty small this year, just because, for one, Jordan Poole being the starting point guard. And you also have, a couple rookies coming in. Bob Carrington at the point. Keyshawn George on the wing is going to get good minutes as well. You still have Bilal Coulibaly. So, yeah, I think we need to see just how long Brogdon will ultimately miss. But, I mean, if you have a good option on the waiver wire, I think I would drop him personally.
I'm dropping him. I mean, I don't like having injured players on my roster. Like, if you have an IL spot, cool. But I think you could probably stash a more upside guy rather than Malcolm Brogdon.
All right. Non-fantasy question. Who wins most improved player? Brian votes Jalen Johnson. No.
It's a good. I mean, he's on my breakout list, so like I think he could take that next leap into most improved category. Like, assuming that the Atlanta Hawks are good. Unfortunately, the way that they're rating the award this year, Victor Wembanyama is the overwhelming favorite, and I don't know how he even qualifies for that. But my bet is actually Jalen Williams. I would take J-Dub in Oklahoma City. I think he's going to go to that all-star level, and Oklahoma City is going to be very good. I don't know how. Maybe Wemby is in the conversation for MVP, and then that disqualifies him from most improved. But yeah, I think if you're betting on it, I would say go Wemby.
I feel like if the Clippers are going to be any good this year, Norman Powell needs to be a finalist for most improved. His scoring dropped to about 13 per game last year. Obviously, the Kawhi Leonard questions, he's probably going to have to do more to begin with because of Paul George leaving. But you add in Kawhi. If the Clippers are in the conversation, I think Norman Powell is going to have a lot to do with it. So I'll throw his name in there.
Yeah, also throw in Emmanuel quickly. I think with RJ Barrett's injury, I think he could get out to a hot start and put up some nice numbers and over 20 points per game, 7 assists. That's definitely in play.
All right. Ryan gives us his results to his 12-team ESPN points league draft. Anthony Davis the 6, LaMelo Ball, Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Jay Will. I'm assuming that's going to be J-Dub, not the other Jalen Williams at 45, Derek White at 56, Cam Thomas 65, Levine 76, Poole 85, Zubats 96, Nurkic 105, Middleton 116, and Ivy at 125.
Killed that. I mean, I think that you definitely got a lot of the players that have high volume scoring, aren't efficient, and probably turn over the ball a decent amount, but that doesn't matter as much in points as it does in categories. So, when you're pairing, Cam Thomas with Jordan Poole and Zach LaVine and Yusuf Nurkic, like I think those are all guys that are going to be really good for points leagues. And your start is just crazy. I mean, to get, Cade, Mobley, Jalen Williams, and then Derek White, that's pretty. You're pretty loaded. I'd like to play in that league.
Yeah, that's really good drafting on your part, Ryan. He follows with another question: is Andre Drummond worth handcuffing the 12-team ESPN points league? 15 player roster spots, 3 IR, 40 games per week max. Would need to drop one of LeVert, Andrew Wiggins, Bilal Coulibaly, Taylor Hendricks, or Trace Jackson Davis.
I'm interested in LeVert because he does have familiarity with Kenny Atkinson in his days in Brooklyn, so I think that actually could be a sneaky chemistry that might be overlooked in fantasy. Like he could be a really good 6-man. I lean towards Bilal just because we don't know what his role is really going to be yet. But I also could just the same. I could drop Wiggins because I have no idea what he's going to offer right now and whether he's even going to start. Yeah. Question being, like, is it worth picking up Drummond for Wiggins? I would say yes. I'd say yes. I would do it.
That's who I was zeroed in on as well. All the wing options that the Warriors have in that roster. Yeah, I think Wiggins is the one I would go ahead and drop there. And his final question is: Tre Mann a great points league flyer at the moment?
Great? No.
Yeah, I'd say no. He'd be a watch list guy for me. He played well down the stretch last season, but the minutes are going to be different with LaMelo Ball back in the fold. So I think he's someone to keep an eye on, because LaMelo the last couple of years hasn't been able to stay healthy. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. I don't think I'd take a flyer on him. I think you can find some better options in terms of available playing time.
Yeah, 12-team league, I don't think you need to go for him right now. He'll be out there.
All right. J-Mac asks, Sar or Risache?
They do different things. I lean towards Sar just because you have the stock upside there, but I think Risache is actually going to be a pretty solid player. I've been impressed by his comfortability and kind of integrating into that Atlanta system already. So long term, I'm going Sar, and in the short term, I think it's probably Sar too.
All right. And here's a name we probably should have mentioned in that most improved player conversation. What do y'all think of Walker Kessler this season? With all the trade talks and last year's slump, is he due for a breakout in your guys' eyes? Yes. I think he's going to begin the season. He began last season as a starter, if I'm not mistaken, but it didn't take much for him to pull him out of the lineup. I don't think that's going to be the case this time around. He's looked pretty good during the preseason too. So I think he's someone that if you have any most improved player futures, consider Walker Kessler for that. Now that I think about it.
I mean, last year he was 84th in 9 cat leagues. The rookie season, he was 57th. He's currently going in the 9th round. That's a steal. And I've been trying to scoop up as much of Walker Kessler as I can. I think he's probably going to be one of those guys that, as we approach draft night, I wouldn't be surprised if he was going in the 7th, 8th round, just for what he can do in terms of block potential, doubles if he's seeing 30 minutes a night. Very low risk pick and with a lot of upside.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Who would be a good pairing with Trae Young at pick number 10? 10-team, 9-category league.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
James Harden is probably going to fall on that turn. LaMelo Ball will certainly be available for you. I think you could get out to a really good start in points, assists, steals, high free throw percentage and threes. Steph Curry, I think, would actually be really good with that. I think Trae is one of those guys that you really can't go wrong in the second round for who's coming around on that turn to kind of pair him with.
Yeah, in terms of a pairing, you're probably not going to find like an elite defensive stat guy at that point. So, yeah, I would go all in on a guard. If you can get like a high volume guard at that spot, I would definitely do that. All right. And now we begin the Jaden Ivey portion of our Q&A. What are your thoughts on Jaden Ivey's preseason performances? Do you think it could be legit or no? And then the next question, Jay LaFleur asked, Derek White or Jaden Ivey in a dynasty league? So I guess we can touch on both of those right now. What do you think about Jaden, how he's looked in preseason?
I think he's looked outstanding. It's like, why the hell was Monty Williams benching this man for, Killian Hayes for much of the season? And why wasn't he starting all year considering they weren't going anywhere? I think the shooting will regress a bit. He's not going to shoot lights out all season, but I think I came away very encouraged in his growth and how he's going to be utilized as, potentially the third scoring option for this Detroit Pistons team. They just look way more competent this year with JB Bickerstaff. So I'm very high on it. And I think he's worth a late round pick. Right now, he's pretty much free, going in the back end of the draft. So I would definitely spend the late round flyer on him.
Yeah, I'll touch on the dynasty part of that question. Jay LaFleur says the 9-cat dynasty. I think it depends. We had an earlier question about a win now dynasty league. I think if you're in win now, I would go Derek White. But if you're looking at long term and building out your roster, I think Ivy may be the better option, slightly. But I think I would go with him in terms of building out a team as opposed to winning now.
Yeah, I would lean towards Jaden Ivey just in terms of age and opportunity. Like, Derek White's 30 years old now, obviously in a really good team, very efficient. But I think Jaden Ivey has a higher ceiling. But the situation right now probably won't showcase that much.
All right. Where would you draft Paul George with the recent injury scare? Seems like he's been slipping. He has been slipping a little bit on boards. I think, what are we looking at? Like early third, maybe even late second when he was healthy. But now I think he may have lost like a full round. I know at a minimum, I'm taking Tyrese Maxey ahead of Paul George in drafts.
Yeah, so far the ADP data on Yahoo hasn't gone too crazy. Like he's only fell like a few spots. So I think mid third, late third to me is more appropriate than where we were drafting him as Raph said, early third, late second. I'm expecting him to go down like at least like a half a round. But I think it's encouraging news that he's only going to be reevaluated in a week. We could be looking at a return to play in maybe 2.5, 3 weeks or something like that. So that's actually not that bad considering where you're drafting him and that value. Like if he returns healthy, like that's going to be a really nice pick for you at the end of the third round.
Air Dunks asks, would you roll with Lonzo Ball on the end of your roster to see what happens?
No, but let's just be happy for the man that he's back on the court.
I agree completely with that. I'd love to have that question to consider in a couple of weeks, but
let's not put this. Let's pump the brakes a bit. Let's make sure he can get through these first exhibitions healthy.
Okay. Yeah, I asked earlier what you guys think of Gradey. Apparently, you two removed my question. Laugh out loud. Anyway, is he worth the last pick, 14-team head-to-head, or watch list for now?
14-team? Yeah, I think that you could give a flyer on it, especially if you're looking for threes late in drafts. I think he showed at the end of the last season once he got the opportunity to get a little comfortable. We saw a little bit more of his offensive capabilities, and he's getting downhill better. Obviously, he's a good shooter on the wing. So I think from a low risk standpoint, like he's worthy of a late round pick if you need threes and some scoring. I don't know what we're going to get from him defensively, but I'm saying, like, I think it could be something to round out other categories of your team if you're looking for that.
Yeah, I think he's worth it, especially with the RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley injury situations. I think Quickley's going to be back sooner. Either way, they need another shooter in that rotation, and that's pretty much why they drafted Gradey. So I think He's worth the last pick, 14-team draft. I don't have a problem with that. Let's see. Is it good to hold Yves Missi as a pickup with both IL filled? I would think New Orleans would come to their senses and not play Herb at center. And I think Missi can outplay Tice. I think the bigger question is how much will they play Zion at center, if at all. If you're asking Herb Jones to defend centers, there's a serious problem with that, no matter how good he is as a defender. So, man, I guess you can hold Missi because Daniel Tice is Daniel Tice at this point in his career. Like, the upside really doesn't excite me or anyone else for that matter. So I guess it depends on what size your league is, but you have both your IL spots filled. So you may have to drop him now that I think about it.
Yeah, depending on who's in that IL spot.
Yeah.
I think Missi is an interesting late round flyer who could earn 20 minutes a night, depending on how much they play Zion at center and what they want to do with Daniel Tice. Because I think either way, Tice is going to be in a timeshare. It's just a matter of who that's with. And I think what we've seen from Missi in the preseason, very capable shot blocker. Obviously, he's going to have a high field goal percentage, but I don't think you need to hold him. But I think he's probably in the conversation for, if you're in a 14-team league or you're looking for some blocks late, he might be worth the late round ad.
Good Joe asks, is Trey Murphy ready to start the season? I have an answer for that, actually. When he was injured on October 3rd, they announced he'd be reevaluated in 3 weeks, which means
reevaluated.
Yeah. So he's
not making it.
And plus, we're talking about a hamstring. We know how those soft tissue injuries can be. They're going to take their time with that. So, yeah, he's not going to be ready. Maybe you can get him at a discount in drafts, but he's definitely not going to go undrafted. I'll say that much for him.
Right.
And then got this question. Do you prefer 12, 14, or 16-team leagues? I'll let you go first, Dan.
I prefer 12, but I'm not mad at 14 because I think, it kind of serves for me, as a nerd and loving stats and getting into the deep depths of basketball. You can pick up a lot of interesting people to help your team win. So I'm intrigued by 14 teams, but I prefer 12.
Yeah, same here. I just think there's a better distribution of talent in a 12-team league. 16, that's kind of pushing it. I'm in a couple 30-teamers this year. That's even worse. Like, you talk about scraping the bottom of the barrel. Yeah.
Bro, have you seen my 30 team in the one? I think you were pretty good at it. I think you went to the playoffs in the 130 deep. My team is awful. I think I picked up I can't even name the names. It's so bad. I'm still hanging on to Nick Smith as my future pick. It's bad. Right.
Who's your first rounder in that one?
I think it was Kevin Durant. So my best players are Kevin Durant and Draymond Green and I think it's DeAndre Ayton. That's my trio. Ugly. I'm not winning anything.
Yeah, that's gonna be tough, man.
I'm playing for 2040, apparently.
All right, there you go. All right. And then we'll wrap up with this question here. When is it a good time to pick up Kristaps, or should he be drafted in a normal size league? Are you the one drafting him? Why not?
Why not is a good question, man. Right now his ADP is 102 on Yahoo, which is 9th round. I feel like that's actually worth the drafting stash, but I think it also depends on how your draft went before that. If you were, hopefully you have some insurance policies baked in there for the center spot. If you're playing on Yahoo, you got to account for those two centers. But if you already have your two centers and you want to play for upside, you just got to be prepared. Porzingis isn't going to play meaningful minutes until probably the All-Star break. It's going to be approaching that February territory. So I think it's worth the risk because we know what he can do for blocks, points, pretty much he's a 5-tool fantasy guy. So I think it's worth it around the 9th round if you have the right build. But if he falls to the 10th, I would have no problem taking him as a draft and stash if you have an IL spot available. Yeah,
I think outside of the top 100 is when you start looking for him. Just because, like you mentioned, your hope with Porzingis is that he'll be healthy come fantasy playoff time.
Yeah.
And playing with it, that's pretty much what you're betting on here if you draft him. So 9th, 10th round, I think that's the earliest you should be looking for him. And it's going to be a pretty tight window because the centers at that point in drafts, you're either talking about centers who don't really offer the sexiest fantasy profile or guys who are just a roll of the dice to even play rotation minutes. So I think that's where he's going to be coming off the board there.
Yeah, as I'm looking at the ADPs around him, Daniel Gafford, John Collins, Zach Edey, Derek Lively, Ayako Kongwu. You know what I'm saying? Like those are
a lot of timeshares.
A lot of timeshare guys, exactly.
Okay. All right, I lied. We'll throw this last one in there. Good Joe asked, better outlook, Jeremy Sohan or Taylor Hendricks?
Give me Sohan. I think we're gonna see some fantasy value unlocked here. And as much as we hated on Pop for giving him the opportunity to play point guard last year, I think that was actually a good thing for his long-term outlook as a facilitator. I think he plays really well in that dunker spot. Yeah. And I think he could be like an Aaron Gordon type of player where, he'd get rebounds, get some sneaky assists. He has some defensive chops there. I think I'm higher on him, but he just doesn't shoot threes. So I think it depends on what your build is. And, I think there's a case to be made that Hendricks or Sohan could be better for your team. So I'm going to lead Sohan.
Yeah, it's all about the team build with both of these guys. I think Sohan being back in his customary position and having Chris Paul on the floor will help him. So I'm going to lean Sohan in that spot. Hendricks playing next to a young point guard in Keontae George. I think the peaks and valleys could be a bit more extreme for him at Utah. So, I'll take Sohan.
Well said.
All right. We've gone about an hour. I just want to thank you all for tuning in to the first episode of the Rotoworld Fantasy Basketball Q&A. Thank you to Dan Titus for joining me on this show. I think we will have one every week. Probably have some rotating guests because Dan doesn't have to do this all the time. Well, I do. So.
Happy to join you anytime to talk ball, Raph.
Yeah, I appreciate it. But once again, thank you guys for sticking with us and asking some really good questions. Good luck in your drafts and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.